Hi there, and welcome to Plant CEO. In today's episode, I'd like to welcome Paul Shapiro, the CEO of the Better Meat Company. Hey, Paul, how's it going?
Anant, nice to see you. How are you doing?
Nice to see you too. So, yeah, I'm really glad to get you on the show. I've been seeing your work that you've been doing with your podcast too, which is awesome. So, I'd definitely recommend everyone to sign up and subscribe to that one. And also really keen to learn more about the Better Meat Company.
Well, that's very kind of you. As you already know, but I will tell your own listeners, I'm a listener of Plant CEO. So it's an honor for me to be a guest on with you now. And I admire what you're doing, and I'm grateful for all that you're doing to help advance the plant-based space. So thank you very much. And it's very kind of you to mention my own podcast, Business for Good. And I'd welcome anybody checking that out. But Plant CEO is a great podcast, and I'm thrilled to be chatting with you.
Awesome. So I think we're going to start, and you're going to show us a little bit of a tour, right, in your facilities. And you can tell everyone where you are at the moment. That would be fantastic.
Sure. Well, welcome to West Sacramento, California. And so we are a little bit kind of like in between Sacramento and Davis, for those of you who are familiar with Northern California. But you're at the Better Meat Co. headquarters. And the Better Meat Co. is a food technology startup based here in Northern California that is using the power of fermentation to make next generation plant protein ingredients. So just by way of background, most plant-based meat today is made out of pea, wheat, or soy, or some combination thereof. And the problem with wheat, pea, and soy, among others, is that they don't naturally have a meat-like texture, and they're not as high in protein as meat. And so just to take pea as an example, you've got to grow a whole field of peas, then you've got to harvest them, then you've got to turn it into a powder. So now you have a pea powder that's about 20% protein. But that isn't high enough in protein, and it doesn't have the texture of meat. So you need to fractionate it and isolate it. So you're removing the fiber, you're removing the fat, you're concentrating that protein down. Then you've got a pea protein powder that still does not have the texture of meat. So what you need to do is subject it to a process that's called twin screw high moisture extrusion. And that creates a lot of heat and a lot of pressure. It turns that pea protein powder into a liquid that has so much pressure on it that when it comes out of what's called a die at the end of this machine, it puffs up and it has a meatier texture than it did before. So that's the base ingredient for a lot of plant-based meat today, is an extruded pea protein isolate. What we are doing at the Better Meat Co. is creating a next generation of whole food texturized plant protein ingredients that don't require fractionation, don't require isolation, don't require extrusion. Simply through the power of fermentation, we are taking whole foods like potatoes, subjecting them to a fermentation that takes less than 1 day. And in that less than 1 day, it is transformed into a product that has a naturally meaty texture, that's higher in protein than eggs, higher in iron than beef, naturally contains vitamin B12, and is also rich in potassium and fiber and many other things that we want as well. So it's a truly magical experience, but indeed, it's really actually not magic, it's science. And I'm happy to show you around and show you how we use fermentation to create really meat-like products that are actually made from whole foods that have very minimal processing associated with them.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. And in terms of you mentioned there about the percentage of protein in peas. Did you say 20%? And then, so basically your end product, where does that get to in terms of?
Sure. Well, peas are in a whole food, like as a pea, it's about 20% protein. But when you do what you need to do to get a pea protein powder or an isolate, you're getting rid of the fiber and the fat. So you're concentrating down that protein. So in that case, when you now have a pea protein powder, you're talking about something that's like 70 or 80% protein. Right. So that is, a lot of concentration that's occurring there. And so that's what's called an isolate. And that's basically the isolated pea protein. What we're doing at Better Meat Co. is creating a product that as a whole food in and of itself is around 43% protein. And so that is very high for a whole food, a whole plant food. And it's basically the texture, though, that we're going for. We love that it's high in protein. That's awesome. But it's really the fact of the matter is that you have something that is just much meatier than an isolated plant protein extrudate, which is what those types of foods are called. Now, don't get me wrong. I love pea protein. I think it's awesome. I'm thrilled to eat the products of the companies using it, but we're offering a next generation product that is even better. And it's better both in terms of its nutrition and in terms of the minimal processing associated with it. But importantly, it is functionally better. It is simply a much meatier experience that we're able to get through fermentation than you can get by fractionating and extruding plant protein isolates.
Got it. So yes, let's make ourselves go on the tour journey with you now then.
All right, I'm going to give my phone to my colleague, Donnie Kirkendall, who is the executive vice president of our company. We're going to flip this camera around and we're going to take you in and show you a little bit about what we're doing here at the Better Meat Co. We're going to bring you in. Well, actually, first we'll show you, we have some really cool stuff in our lobby here. We're big fans of Carl Sagan, so he is emblazoned on the wall in our lobby here. And then over here, we have a quote from Buckminster Fuller on the wall with a harpoon. You can see Naran Ali, who is our senior accountant here at Better Meat Co. But Buckminster Fuller, who is the famous inventor of the geodesic dome and other inventions, said that to change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. And so we have a harpoon there because for centuries, the way that we had to light our homes was through whale oil. And we really turned the blue oceans red with the whale's blood to light our homes. And there were lots of concerns in the 19th century about this problem of the sustainability. We're going to render whales extinct. In fact, if you read 19th century newspapers, you'll see letters to the editor pleading for mercy for the whales. But it wasn't letters to the editor, it wasn't sustainability concerns that freed the whales from harpoons. Indeed, it was the invention of kerosene. And so in the same way that kerosene freed whales from harpoons, we believe that fermentation and other types of sustainable animal-free protein technology are going to help free farm animals from factory farms. So you can come on in here, and I'll show you how we are making meat-like foods in a very small amount of time. So we'll first enter our lab where you can see here what we're doing is fermenting at a very small scale our type of microflora, which essentially means that we are feeding different microflora, different ingredients to see how fast they will grow. And so if you were running a chicken farm, let's say, you would, let's say, segregate lots of chickens into different things, different pens, feed them different ingredients and see how that affected their growth rates. Well, we're not farming chickens, we are farming microbes. And so we run tests like this to see what makes our microbes grow the fastest. Up on the wall here, you can see a mural. It's a 40-foot mural that shows our vision for the future. And it begins in the past. This is the evolution of meat consumption by humanity. So you can see in the past when we were hunter-gatherers, slaughtering, for example, bison to get meat. The bison and the indigenous people were replaced, of course, by cowboys who ended up wrangling cattle to obtain meat. You then can come over here and see the inception of factory farming, which is starting to confine animals, not yet indoors, but bringing them into tighter and tighter spaces. And then to today, where we have factory farming where conditions are absolutely deplorable for farm animals, where, for example, chickens are confined by tens of thousands inside of windowless warehouses where they live wing to wing. And then the future, which is a fermentation-fueled future where companies like the Better Meat Co. will be supplying meat-type products to satiate humanity's demand for this type of a product without the need to slaughter animals at all. In fact, you can see the bison have returned, and there is a very nice portrait of a group of folks enjoying Better Meat Co. steaks and other products. So that's our vision for the future and how we are going to free humanity and animals from factory farming. We don't think we're going to do this by ourselves, of course, but we think that we're part of the solution. So if you think about, for example, the problem of fossil fuels, it's so great that you don't want just one solution, right? You want lots of alternatives. You want wind, you want solar, you want geothermal. Well, the problem of factory farms is also so severe that you want lots of alternatives. You want cellular agriculture, you want plant-based meat, you want fermentation products, you want hybridized products. It's also great just for people to eat less meat. enjoy lentil soup or to eat a bean and rice burrito. I love those foods too. I hope more people will eat them. But we're going to bring you now from the lab, and we'll bring you into a factory here where you can see just what we're doing. And so this is a side of our factory where we are essentially treating what we call our media, which is just a fancy way of saying the nutrition that we feed to our microflora. So in effect, you think about that chicken farm analogy. If we were raising chickens, we only want our chickens in the farm. We don't want pigs or turkeys or cows. We only want our chickens because we don't want competition for the food that we're giving them. So in our case, that means we don't want bacteria, we don't want yeast. So all the equipment that you're going to see on this side is essentially equipment designed to sterilize the food that we are feeding to our microflora, which in this case is usually going to be a potato-based diet for them. They're very efficient at consuming carbohydrates and turning them into protein. And so everything that you're going to see on this side is essentially how we end up getting our food ready for our little microflora to consume. Now we're going to go onto this side and show you a tank where that brings all of our little microflora into our facility, where it takes them less than 1 day to grow up into a big chicken, so to speak, but a lot of meat. So if you look over here, you can see we have folks here who are processing some test material. Prachi, you're on a podcast right now. You can say, you want to show people what the mycelium looks like right after harvesting? This is no processing at all. This is straight from the fermenter. You can see here.
It's really wet right now, and we'll de-water it farther, but you can see that fiber structure. That's very natural to the organism.
Mm-hmm. So you can see essentially it looks kind of like raw chicken. And what that means is that we can start with a base of that and then turn it into anything, from a chicken breast to a steak to a fish stick to a chicken nugget or a hamburger and more. So we'll bring you in here now. You can see what the product looks like when it's dried. So these are dried pieces of mycoprotein that we call rhiza. Rhiza is just Latin for the word root. And so you can come in here and see an oven where we're essentially turning our mycoproteins into small granules. And so this whole side of our facility is what we call our downstream processing that enables us to essentially remove water from the mycoprotein that you just saw and turn it into products that are going to look and taste just like meat. And again, we can make it into ground meat products. We can make it into whole muscle cut products like a steak. If you go onto the Better Meat Goes Instagram, you'll see some really awesome, succulent looking photos of those products. But that's our facility. And we're really glad that you have taken a tour with us. And we'll now bring you back into a boring conference room where you can learn more about what we're doing. So thank you, Doni, for videotaping. Let me turn this around so you can meet Doni, our Executive Vice President. And we really appreciate it. All right.
So yeah, again, thank you for that, Paul. That was fantastic. And so thinking about the products now that you're creating, so you've got your own range of products and you're also making this hybrid solution that you can actually sell to meat companies to help them reduce their footprint of usage of actual animals, correct?
Yeah, that's right. So we're a B2B ingredients startup. So we aren't making finished goods that we intend to put out on the market. We are an ingredient supplier to food companies. And that includes both to plant-based companies and to companies that use animal meat. So, you know, my belief is that we need to help the big food companies use fewer animals. And so we are happy to sell them our plant protein formulations that they can blend into their food products so they can use less meat. In the same way that, for example, when you go and get gasoline in the United States in your car, you don't contemplate it, but it's 10% ethanol. So you're using 10% renewable. You know, we believe that if we could get the big food companies to just remove some of the meat from their products, that they would actually reduce their footprint so dramatically that it would be a greater gain in terms of the reduction in number of animals who are raised and slaughtered than if we were just merely putting out our own vegan products, which is something that's quite admirable to do as well. But we believe in that dual strategy. So I'm a big fan of seeing the big food companies use fewer animals and in putting out plant-based products. And so we supply into both of those markets.
Yeah. So thinking of, I guess, the blended products, where do you see yourselves and maybe other companies who are offering those ingredients as a percentage of their, the products that are being produced?
Sure.
For example, if McDonald's is 100% beef product, do you think they'll start to switch? Because I think from what I heard is that they actually, companies like McDonald's and Burger King actually did have a blended product, but people started to complain, and then they reversed it and started to include 100% beef, and that was their marketing around that.
Yeah, I'm not aware of McDonald's ever not being 100% beef, but maybe I'm wrong about that. I just haven't heard of it, but they are 100% right now. And so, our proposition is that when you have a product that is solely meat, it is inferior to a hybrid product. And so, really a hybrid product should be an enhanced product, not, there are some ingredients that you can use that, we don't like to use the F word, filler. But those are these cheap ingredients that you can put in there that just fill it up. That generally is things like breadcrumbs or cellulose or things like that really don't add any nutrition. What the Better Meat Co. offers, though, is actual meat enhancers. Things are going to either maintain or enhance or increase your amount of protein in the product. They're going to increase your fiber. They're going to do really important things. They're going to make it taste better. So I'll just give you an example, Anant. So Purdue Farms, which is a really big chicken company in the United States, makes a product that's called Purdue Chicken Plus. That product is a 50% chicken, 50% plant-based product that includes Better Meat Co. ingredients. And it's sold in thousands of grocery stores, and it's gone from 0% 2 years ago of Purdue's frozen chicken nugget sales to now being 20% of their frozen chicken nugget sales. So 20% of this massive chicken company's products are 50% not chicken. Interestingly enough, Chris Purdue has said in interviews that they actually outperform, the Chicken Plus outperforms the conventional chicken nuggets on taste tests with their customers. Not only that, but the Food Network named, after taste testing lots of different frozen chicken nugget brands, named Purdue Chicken Plus the best tasting frozen chicken nugget in America. So think about that. The best tasting frozen chicken nugget in America is only half chicken. Just imagine if all chicken nuggets were only half chicken, we would have better tasting nuggets, and you would need hundreds of millions, if not billions, fewer chickens to be raised for food. So it would be a huge win-win that would really be transformative in terms of our agricultural system. Now, that's only one product. Of course, that's not true for most chicken nuggets. If you go currently to McDonald's or Burger King, their chicken nuggets are sadly solely chicken, aside from the exterior breading on it. So we need to do more. We need to get more in there to show that hybridized meats are better meat. It's kind of like if you were to go, let's say, to a juice joint or something, and they ask you, oh, do you want to boost your smoothie with matcha or hemp seeds or something that you view as an enhancement? You don't view yourself as getting less smoothie. You view yourself as getting a better smoothie. Well, by boosting meat with plant protein, you're getting better meat. Not necessarily, you don't have to think about it as something where it's like, that anybody would be concerned about. It would be something that people would prefer.
Yeah, I think that also the other important thing that you said there was that it gives you the additional fiber. So in order to absorb the protein, you actually need a decent amount of fiber to go with it. So, enhancing it that way actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things that I think is so strange about our society is that people are so protein obsessed. You see on product packaging, X grams of protein, where do you get your protein? Every vegan hears this question like every week of their lives. Where do you get your protein? The reality is that neither you, Anant, nor me, nor anybody listening to this podcast is protein deficient. In fact, you probably have never met anybody who's protein deficient. Yet nearly every single person you meet is fiber deficient. Virtually every person you ever meet is fiber deficient. At least in America, I don't know what the stats are in the UK, but in America, 9 out of 10 people, more than 9 out of 10 people don't eat the recommended daily allotment of fiber. And so the question shouldn't be, where do you get your protein? The question should be, where do you get your fiber? And where you don't get fiber? Meat. There's not 1 gram of protein, not 1 gram of fiber in any meat product. Like,
exactly.
The animals don't make fiber. Plants make fiber because they don't have skeletons. Fiber is what holds the plant up. Animals have skeletons, whereas plants don't have skeletons. They have fiber, and that's what holds them up. And that's what we need. And we know that being fiber deficient increases your risk, not just of constipation, but of colon cancer and so many other illnesses. So, I mean, I really can't underscore enough what you're saying, Anant, which is that, if people are not necessarily giving up meat, well, put some fiber in the meat then and let them get less animals and more plants. And, one of the things, I know this is a show that is listened to by a lot of plant-based enthusiasts. I myself am a vegan. I've been vegan for nearly 30 years. My wife is a vegan cookbook author. So I just got to get that out of the way and say, I wish that more people would be choosing that lifestyle. That would be fantastic. But let's just, have a little reality check. Meat consumption is going up, not down. It's going up in the UK. It's going up in the United States. It's going up in China, up in Mexico, up in Brazil, up in India. All the places it's going to matter the most in the future, meat demand per person is going up. This is not a message that a lot of people in our plant-based bubble hear, because we see all the headlines. We see, Beyond and Impossible are doing these amazing things, which is fantastic. I can't possibly root for those companies enough. But it does not change the fact that per capita meat demand is still going up, not down. And so we got to do something. We have to do something. And that is going to include hybridizing meat, in my opinion, along with a number of other strategies. Again, that's only one strategy, but I think it's a really important strategy to help turn this tide, because we don't have a lot of time. There's already 8 billion of us on the planet almost right now. We're projected to have another couple billion of us by 2050. We're not going to start farming the moon. We're not going to start farming Mars. We don't have any more of our planet left to destroy almost than what we've already done, which has been quite horrible. So we've got to get better. We've got to produce a lot more protein with a lot fewer resources and a lot fewer animals. And that instead of meaning going big with animal agriculture, it means we need to go small. Small with cellular agriculture, small with microbial fermentation. We have to produce much more with much less, and that's how you do it.
Just thinking about the cellular side, do you think there could be an opportunity in the future where you'd also be blending your products with the cell-based meat approach as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I really enjoyed your interview, Anant, with Josh Tetrick from Eat Just. And, the product that they are serving is not entirely made from animal cells. Their cultivated chicken that they're serving in Singapore is partially plant-based, but majority animal cells. And so I see room, though, for major collaborations between companies like ours and the cultivated meat companies, because they can hybridize their products and create something that's even better than a product that is solely meat. I really believe that when you combine those two worlds of animal protein and plant protein, you get a product that's even better than one that is solely animal meat. So I think that there's a big room for collaboration between those companies in the cultivated meat space and the hybrid space too.
Yeah, I hope so too. I think that makes a lot of sense. And one of the things I wanted to ask you is about, obviously you've got, the taste, the texture. A lot of companies are sort of obviously investing huge amounts in R&D to make sure that's right. What about the smell? And, are you adding other things around that, or are you leaving that to the other companies to sort of solve that side?
Oftentimes taste and smell go together. And so when you add something that makes something, let's say, taste like chicken, you're probably also making it smell like chicken. So, usually companies in this space will add certain things like yeast extracts in order to impart a meaty type flavor and smell to their products.
Okay. And at the moment, in terms of what you're doing, obviously there's, European companies like Corn in this area who are also have a similar approach, I would say. Is there any other companies in the US also doing what you're doing, or is this fairly new for you there?
Yeah. Well, first, let me just give my respect to the OGs, because Corn has been at the microbial fermentation game for decades, and they really pioneered this space. I'm a big fan of their company. I like eating their vegan products. Sadly, most of their products are not vegan. They use egg whites as a binder, but they have some really good vegan products, and I really enjoy them. And it's a company that I admire and respect a lot. They had a very big acquisition back in 2015 where they were acquired for, I think, like nearly $800 million US. And that really shows that there is a pathway to success using this type of technology. people today are talking about beyond and impossible so much, but we forget that, corn had this massive acquisition just 6 years ago, and they were like the originals in this really interesting food technology space of creating, using fermentation and other really interesting food technology to replace animals in the supply chain. So I have a lot of respect for corn, and I would love to have a fraction of the success that they've had. Now, to answer your question directly, Anant, yeah, so what we're doing is pioneering a method of fermentation that utilizes organisms from the fungi kingdom. So if you think about plants and animals, right? You have plants on one end of the spectrum, evolutionarily speaking, then you got animals all the way on this other side. But in between them, and not in the middle, much closer to animals, you have fungi. And fungi are so much closer to animals, in fact, that like animals, they breathe in oxygen and they breathe out CO2. So think about that. We know plants breathe in CO2 and sequester it, and then they breathe out oxygen. Animals do the opposite. We breathe in oxygen and breathe out CO2. Fungi are so much closer to us that they breathe in oxygen and breathe out CO2. So that's why you have a much greater similarity between the flesh, so to speak, of a mushroom and the flesh of an animal than you do with plants. For hundreds of years, people have been using mushrooms as meat substitutes because the mushroom's flesh is so much meatier than a plant's flesh. And that makes sense because evolutionarily, fungi are so much closer to animals than to plants. So there are a number of startups in our space now that are using fungi fermentation to create products that look and taste a lot more like meat than what you can get from plant proteins. And so one company in the space is actually where you are in the UK. They're actually in Scotland, which is called 3F Bio. They've recently, I think, changed their name to Enough, but they're doing some really interesting fungi fermentation. Their CEO is a former corn executive, actually. So the corn will have maybe a little bit of competition, maybe, but I don't know. But it's a B2B ingredients company over there, so maybe it won't be as competitive to corn. I don't know. But so that's like one example. And there's some smaller startups in the US also that are also doing really interesting things with fungi fermentation. One of them, for example, is called Aquacultured Foods, with a person named Anne Palermo, who has started that company doing whole muscle mimicry for seafood products using fungi fermentation. There's other cool companies. For example, At Last is in, which is a spinoff from Ecovative, which is a really cool fungi fermentation company in the United States too. Ecovative has been using fungi fermentation for years to make packaging, but now they're making bacon type products with it. So yes, the point is there's some really cool stuff that's going on. And I believe that the future is going to not just involve plants, it'll also include fungi, and that using fermentation to make really efficient, really meat-like experiences for people is going to be a big part of the future of the alternative protein industry.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier that it's been over 30 years that you've been vegan, which is astonishing. And just want to say congratulations for that.
Nearly 30 years. I think I'm at 29 right now. But yes, is it astonishing that I'm still alive? I don't know. I don't know. People back then didn't think you could do it. I remember when I first became vegan back in 1993, people did not know what the word meant. They didn't know how to pronounce it. If anything, they thought you were from Las Vegas. Like, they didn't know anything about it. And I remember, one person said to me, they thought it was kind of like holding your breath, that you might be able to hold your breath for some amount of time, but if you do it too long, you'll die, right? And so you could go without animal products for a certain amount of time, but if you do it too long, you're going to die. And that's basically what I was told back in 1993. And I believed it. I really thought that was possibly true. Thankfully, I learned pretty quickly that was not true. And I'm glad to have done it. I made many bad decisions in my life, but that was one of the good ones.
You were in high school when you made that decision, and I think you learned about the meat production industry, but can you actually recall what you saw, what information you had at such a early age to make you realize that? And then also very quickly, you gave up meat, but then also dairy soon afterwards.
Yeah, that's right. So I do remember, Ananta. I was 13 years old at the time, and I think I just turned 14 actually. But either way, I was shown by a friend of mine a video about what happens to animals in factory farms and in slaughterhouses. Now, keep in mind, there's no YouTube back then. There's no internet to watch videos on. There's like a VHS tape that my friend had. And for those of you who are too young to know, a VHS tape was like a rectangular piece of plastic with some tape in, and you put it in a machine called a VCR, and it showed you a video. So, I watched it, and honestly, my friend at the time he showed it to me like not as he wasn't a vegetarian himself. He just thought it was cool. Like that was like, he was like, dude, this is sick. You got to watch this. Like it was not like, oh, like this is so terrible. It was more like, dude, right, this is crazy. You got to see this. But I watched it, and I had a really strong sense of just a horrible feeling of injustice being committed. I really felt like, these animals were being bullied, not for any reason that made sense, but just because we were stronger than they are. And I kept envisioning, as I was watching animals in cages, and I was watching animals on the slaughter line, and I kept thinking, like, what if those were my dogs? My family had dogs. I loved them very much. And I just thought, if those are my dogs, there's nothing I wouldn't do to stop that from happening to them. But pretty quickly I realized, well, why should it happen to any animal? So I became a vegetarian, and I never heard of a vegan. In fact, when I started reading about it a little bit later, I thought it was vegan. And I wrote to like animal welfare organizations in the mail and put things in the snail mail, which for those of you was like what predated email, a way of communication. We would put things in the mail and send them to one another. I got back like this literature of reading about vegans, what I thought was vegans. And I thought that was kind of crazy. But then I met a couple of them. I started volunteering myself, and I met some of them. And I thought, wow, if these people can do it, they're actually living. And they don't look pale, they don't look sickly, like they look like healthy people. But what really helped push me over the edge also was at that time, there was an athlete named Carl Lewis.
Yes.
And for those of, so, today, it would be like Usain Bolt, right? Like, but Carl Lewis at that time was like the Usain Bolt. He's like the fastest man on the planet, mega gold medalist for the US Olympics team. And I worshiped Carl Lewis. I really loved him. And I read an interview with him where he talked about how his best years were his years as a vegan athlete. And he still to this day promotes plant-based eating. In fact, he's now a spokesperson for Silk Soy Milk. And, a guy is like 60 years old, and he's still a great athlete. So anyway, knowing that Carl Lewis was vegan was like this social proofing for me. It helped me to understand that not only could you be vegan, but you could actually be, at the height of what I considered like the epitome of health and athleticism. And so that helped me push me over the edge. And that led to one thing, led to another. And now I'm sitting here.
Yeah. And let's say now, if you were going to speak to another 13 or 14-year-old, you were showing a video. What do you think would resonate for them in today's world, where they're short on attention, but they also are very keen to do something about the mess that we're in, especially with sustainability and climate change when you're looking at animal farming?
Yeah, so, first and foremost, I've shown a lot of people videos of what happens to animals, and I can tell you most of them have not become vegetarians. So I don't think, just showing people, like, I don't think that the problem is that, oh, we just need people to be aware, right? I used to believe that a long time ago. I just don't think that anymore. I think that we need to make it easy for people to make the right decision. I think we need to make it convenient. I think we need to make it cost effective. People want meat. The reality is, like, every culture, as soon as they can afford it, they start eating a lot more meat. People basically buy as much meat as they can afford. And we have to supply them with that meat type experience that people want. I mean, even vegetarians want meat. And, people who listen to this may take umbrage at that, but, I'll tell you a few things. First, according to the surveys, like, there's 87% recidivism for vegetarians. They stop being vegetarian and go back to meat consumption. But even at Veg Fest, I mean, when I was giving a talk at a Veg Fest, and there's like all these booths where it's like quinoa salad and kale wraps, and then they got Beyond Burgers, right? And that line was by far the longest line. I mean, 10-to-1 ratio by how long that line was, showing that even people at a vegetarian festival want a meat-like experience. Now, that doesn't mean they want animals to be slaughtered for it. Of course not. But there does seem to be something for most humans that they crave meat. They don't want slaughter necessarily, but they do want that experience. There's something in us where they just seem to really want it. And so I think that if I were talking to somebody who were of that age, well, of course, it's much easier to change your habits when you're only 13 than when you're 30 or 40. So I would certainly, make the case to them as to why their future is going to be better secured if more people would adopt a plant-based diet for all the reasons that you noted and not correctly. But I also would encourage them to get involved in the world of food technology. And that doesn't mean they have to become a biologist or a tissue engineer. They could get involved in marketing or communication, a whole bunch of things. And we have accountants, we have, like you could do anything, but I would encourage them to use their life to try to help make it easier to satisfy the meat craving that humans seem to have without needing to raise and slaughter animals.
Yeah, for sure. And, we've got to create this career industry, right? For this talent to come into this world and go on this journey with you to make it a better place.
Yeah, exactly. And so I would start interning. Like, if I were 13 or 14, I would be looking for a way to intern at a alternative protein company and ask like, hey, what can I do? I'd be happy to sweep the floors, actually. Like, it wouldn't matter to me. I'd be thrilled. So I would look at it like that. And, just to underscore something, I was just thinking about this, how in California the other day, like a week ago, we had this case where dozens of cows escaped from a slaughterhouse and they stampeded through residential neighborhoods, like suburban neighborhoods. Okay. And they were all rounded up and captured. One of them did end up going to farm sanctuary, but the rest of them were killed. And everybody is rooting for these cows. People are cheering on the cows on social media, in person. Everybody's rooting on these cows who fled for their lives, literally. Yet, of course, 99% of those people who are rooting for the cows are going to go eat beef, maybe even that night. And it's just further affirmation that people love animals, but they also love meat, and they would be very happy to enjoy a meat type experience without the need for slaughter. In the same way that when somebody flicks on a switch and they just want light, like they're not thinking, is this light coming from a fossil fuel or is it coming from solar? Like, they're not thinking about that. They just want light. People just want a meat experience, and they don't care whether it comes from a slaughtered animal or from microbial fermentation. They just want the meat experience. And so that's what we need to give them. And I hope that more people will get involved in this space to help wean humanity off of factory farming of animals, because it really is the driving force in so many of the ills that we're facing right now.
Yeah. And moving on to your podcast, you've had some fantastic guests as well, like John Mackey, Peter Singer. You also had Eric Adams, that could be, the next mayor potentially in New York. Yeah, which is great. So, which was if you had to highlight some of your guests, you've had so many fantastic people. Which one did you enjoy the most?
Wow. Well, I would hate to be so undiplomatic as to put one on top. Yeah. But I will say this, so first of all, about Eric Adams, a lot of people haven't heard of him, but people who listen to your show, Anant, will be interested that, this is a guy who's the front runner to be mayor of America's largest city right now. And he's vegan. He's not only vegan, he wrote a book about being vegan. This is an unbelievable opportunity to have somebody with one of the most powerful positions in the nation who really dramatically cares about plant-based eating. So he is currently, we're recording this on July 1st, 2021, and as of the latest count, he's still in the lead. Hopefully he'll remain in the lead, but we'll see. Now, all that said, I'll just tell you about the latest guest in an episode that came out today. Her name is Deborah Torres, and she is a really interesting story because she began her life in a pretty typical way. She was, working for the telephone company Verizon, and she went to the supermarket one day, and a chance encounter with a stranger at the supermarket who was vegan led her to ultimately become vegan herself. And she started making food for her family, including a vegan fried chicken that they all really liked. And so she started, maybe just doing this like locally just to give to her friends and family. And then one day she got a message from a Veg Fest in Chicago asking if she would go from California to Chicago to serve her vegan fried chicken. And she couldn't believe it. I mean, she didn't even have a business. This was just, getting this. She didn't even know if it was real. So I'm going to condense this story, but Deborah then went from California to Chicago. People loved it. They sold out of their fried chicken there. She then went and got invited to the National Fried Chicken Festival. Who knew there was even such an event? But there is a National Fried Chicken Festival in New Orleans, and her fried chicken won Time Magazine's best fried chicken of the entire festival. It was the only vegan fried chicken, and it won best of all the chickens there. So that led her to decide, I'm going to start this company. She starts a company called Atlas Monroe, ends up going on Shark Tank. They offer her $1 million on Shark Tank to buy her company. She says no, declines them. And next thing you know, she now has her own vegan fried chicken factory. Just 2 years later, she's on track to do $5 million in revenue in this calendar year, 2021. And she's never taken outside investment. So many of the companies in our space are taking tens, even hundreds of millions of dollars of investment before they ever make an impact in the market. Yet Atlas Monroe is doing millions of dollars in revenue, and she still owns 100% of her company. So it's a pretty impressive story of an entrepreneur who's bootstrapping her way to success and to helping animals. And that's the latest episode of the Business for Good podcast. And that's the type of stories that we tell on there from a whole variety of perspectives, but big names like ones that you mentioned, but also people you've not heard of, like Deborah Torres.
Yeah. So I've heard of her story. Actually, it's fantastic that you got her on. So I'll include that in the show notes for that episode.
Cool.
And Eric's too. That's awesome. Can you also tell me a little bit about your book, Clean Meat?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So kind of you, Anant. So I wrote a book called Clean Meat: How Growing Meat Without Animals Will Revolutionize Dinner and the World. And I got very fortunate that the book did well, and it became a Washington Post bestseller. But what the book does is it tells the story. It tells the story of the entrepreneurs and the investors and the scientists who are all racing to bring to the world its first slaughter-free meat. So it tells the genesis stories of people like Uma Voeti and Marie Gibbons and Josh Tetrick, who have really helped to pioneer this space of cellular agriculture. It's not a technical book. It's a book that's more like pop science, and it tells the story about who these people are and why they are doing it. So I'd recommend checking it out. I'd be honored to hear what you have to say about it. So you can feel free to, if you go to cleanmeat.com, again, cleanmeat.com, you can buy the book anywhere, but you can buy it on Amazon, anywhere else. Or you can get in touch with me through that website. Love to hear what you think of it, and encourage you to check out the book, because I believe, self-servingly I say this, but it is an inspirational tale about everyday people just like you, the listener, who decided to leave their careers to do something really good for the world and are now trying to forge an entirely new industry to save humanity from itself.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, and back to sort of the Better Meat company now, where do you see the vision of the company going in, say, the next 5 years, and then within 10 years? What would you like to achieve?
Well, there's a lot that I would like to achieve, Anant. So before I tell you that, I will say, we're a 3-year-old company. So it's always like a little bit hubristic for a 3-year-old company to say where they're going to be 10 years from now. Hopefully existing. There's a 90% mortality rate for a startup. So
right.
we hope to beat those odds. But things are looking pretty good. What we're doing is essentially, now that we have built our demonstration scale facility that you took a tour of at the beginning of this interview, we're now going to start looking to not only run this, to do lots of R&D to figure out what are the best ways to run our system to optimize it so we get the best product that we can possibly get for the lowest price, but also to build our next facility, which will be much, much bigger than this facility. We're looking at something that's more comparable to what Corn has in the UK. So, Corn is running these fermentation systems that are massive. I mean, you're talking about like office building sized fermenters. And so we are going to be going out in the fourth quarter of 2021 for our financing round to help build that size of a facility so that we can really have a river of our product, of our mycoprotein that, again, we call Rhiza, to have that river running through the food industry. At this facility, yeah, we can produce thousands of kilos a month. That's great, but we really need to be producing hundreds of thousands a month. And that's what we're going for. And so that'll be the next thing. And then to answer your question about the further future, because that's you're talking about just a few years out, that's what we're going to do. But our goal is to have rise of fermentation facilities all over the world. We want to be in China and in Latin America and in Russia and everywhere else, and have these type of facilities supplying abundant amounts of meat for people to enjoy without the need to raise a single animal.
So in Q4 this year, and to get to you, for that investment, do you have an idea of what you're looking to raise at that point today?
Yeah. On a rough estimate, I think we'll probably be looking to raise maybe about $55 million, but we'll see. We're not yet set on a number, but we think that's going to be the ballpark that we're seeking to raise so far. And we're a very frugal company. We believe that we stretched ours further than many people would believe possible. And so we're really looking forward to getting a chance to show what we can do once we are actually funded properly in our next round, because frankly, we have been underfunded so far for what we've been trying to do. It's very audacious what we're doing. What we've built here is, really incredible. It's a magnificent facility, and we've done it for a fraction of what it would cost normally to do. So we have a lot more to do, and we're really looking forward to partnering with the right folks who want to help us scale up and take our business to the next level.
That's awesome, Paul. So yeah, I wish you the best of luck for that raise at the end of the year. I look forward to seeing all the wonderful guests that you've got coming up for your show too. And awesome on the book. And just being there for the animals for the last 30 years is incredible. And you also did stints at Humane Society, which is great. So you've really been in this game for a long time, and would love to see more people like you coming into the industry.
Well, that's very kind of you, Anant. And again, I really appreciate everything that you are doing to help advance the plant-based movement. It takes a whole village to do this. And by your podcast, which I really enjoy, I know that you're inspiring a lot of people to get involved and make a difference in the world. So thank you.
Great. So thanks again for coming on the show, and speak to you again soon.
Thanks, Anant.
Cheers. Bye-bye.